Saturday at dawn, a man stands over a lawnmower that has refused to run for 3 full weeks. A brand new machine costs only $60 at the local hardware store. Yet he has spent 4 weekends dismantling this one, his knuckles raw, dark oil permanently lodged beneath his fingernails. His wife has gently suggested twice that they simply buy the replacement. He heard every word, but he is not going to replace that mower. And this isn't simple stubbornness. Something deeper is at work. Ancient, quiet, and far more psychologically fascinating than a fear of change. Psychologists call this the repair impulse. It reveals more about a person's past than their present. To grasp why some people repair rather than replace, look beyond the individual. Travel back to the world they inherited, or the world their parents never fully escaped. The generation that encoded this behavior survived the Great Depression and then a world war. These weren't distant headlines. They were everyday life. Soup lines, ration coupons, shoes resoled 4 times before being thrown away. Children of that era learned that objects held weight, that resources could vanish, and that the proper response to a broken thing was understanding it well enough to bring it back. That insight didn't stay in the 1930s. It flowed down through kitchens and garages, through the silent way a father handed his son a wrench. The offspring of those Depression-era parents grew up in the post-war boom. Suddenly, abundance everywhere. New cars, shiny appliances, bulky televisions. But the emotional wiring from the lean years didn't refresh itself. The old behavior persisted inside the new wealth, like an accent that never fades. Psychology calls this the endowment effect. Once an object becomes yours, soaked in your time, effort, and memories, its value rises far above any price tag. A mended lamp carries a story. A new lamp is just merchandise. But here's what most people get wrong. They assume the fixer is mainly trying to save cash. Sometimes, yes. But watch carefully. The act of repair isn't really about the broken thing. It's about the person holding the tools. It's about competence, control, the visceral experience of understanding a mechanism and wielding the power to restore it. Repair restores more than objects. It restores the self. Think of the old clock your grandfather kept running for 50 years. Its value wasn't in the brass gears, but in the mornings it announced. Consider the suburban landscape of the late 1950s. Identical houses, lengthening commutes, work becoming increasingly abstract. A man who spent 8 hours under fluorescent lights moving digits could come home and invest 90 minutes replacing a leaky copper pipe. At the end of that hour and a half, he had done something tangible. The water flowed again. He had fixed it. That psychological payoff is immense. It feeds into what researchers call self-efficacy, the felt conviction that your actions produce real outcomes. When that sense runs low, people crave it. Repair is one of the oldest, most reliable ways to recharge it. That feeling of agency, I did this, is a psychological paycheck no employer can match. This also explains why the urge to fix intensifies during stress. Someone facing financial strain, career uncertainty, or personal loss often becomes the most determined repairer. They can't control their job. They can't steer the economy, but they can strip a carburetor down to its last screw and rebuild it. And so they do. For hours on a Saturday morning in a dusty garage, while a new mower sits on a shelf just $60 away. Have you ever felt that same pull when life feels out of control? There's another layer rarely discussed. The choice to fix instead of replace is, at its core, a form of loyalty. It makes a statement about what things are worth. People with this mindset often inhabit a worldview where abandoning objects, or relationships, or commitments carries a moral gravity. Others don't feel as intensely. Watch how these same individuals behave in their personal lives. They tend to stay longer, try harder, return to difficult conversations again and again. Not because they lack the strength to leave, but because their inner architecture frames walking away as the last option. They apply identical logic. Something is broken, so the right move is to understand why and mend it. This can be a tremendous strength, but also a trap. Not everything broken deserves fixing. Some systems are beyond salvage. Some relationships have truly run their course. And yes, some lawnmowers should simply be replaced. Yet people wired this way often can't reach that verdict until they've exhausted every alternative, lingering long after others would have walked away. This is why some people stay in fading friendships or dying companies long after the rational mind would flee. When does loyalty become a cage? The cultural forces that shaped this psychology didn't vanish with the post-war generation. They diluted, mutated, and re-emerged in fresh forms. Millennials who watched their parents lose homes in 2008 developed their own version of fix not replace, not in carpentry, but in upcycled furniture, patched jeans, propagated houseplants, and resurrected electronics. The specific items changed. The underlying emotional engine did not. Here's something critical. The consumer culture that rose through the 1960s and accelerated through the 1980s was built in opposition to this mindset. Planned obsolescence, designing products to fail so you'd have to buy again, was an economic tactic, not a natural law. The advertising of that era deliberately worked to make repair feel embarrassing. Old things got linked to poverty, to falling behind. New things became aspirational. The hidden message, holding on to a broken version of something, signaled you couldn't afford better. Some people swallowed that message whole. Others rejected it, consciously or not, and kept heading out to their garages on Saturday mornings. That tension is still alive today. In hardware stores, repair cafes, and YouTube tutorials watched by people convinced they can fix the thing before buying a new one. The modern repair movement, right-to-repair legislation, the comeback of craft skills. This isn't just an environmental fad. It's a psychological rebellion against the 40-year narrative that replacement equals progress. What truly drives the person who would rather fix than replace is not backwardness, not an inability to let go, not an irrational attachment to stuff. At its heart, it's a specific relationship with meaning, a deep, mostly unconscious belief that the history embedded in an object, the hours, the repairs, the memory of where it came from, cannot be bought at any store. That belief was forged in hardship and passed through generations who learned that resources are finite, that effort holds honor, and that the ability to restore something broken is one of the most reliable sources of human dignity. What would you choose to fix if you truly believed it mattered? This psychology isn't about being cheap or nostalgic. It's a quiet rebellion against a culture that wants you to believe that new always means better. The fixer knows something that marketers fear, that the act of mending creates a bond no purchase can replicate, and that bond, once formed, is remarkably hard to break. It becomes part of who you are. That's the hidden power. The man in the garage with that stubborn lawnmower isn't refusing to buy a new one. He's refusing to accept that what he already owns isn't worth saving. The question worth sitting with isn't whether that belief is practical. The question is what it would mean for each of us to examine where we apply it and where we don't. Because the things people choose to fix versus the things they choose to replace reveal almost everything about what they've been taught to believe is worth keeping. If this resonated, hit like and subscribe to BrainLeo for more deep dives into the psychology of everyday life.